We've got another great speaker this afternoon. I've known Steve Anderson for a couple of years now, and he's the CEO of the Age Diversity Forum. You do a lot of fantastic work, and I'd just love to hand over to Steve now for his session.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate that. And hello, everyone. I hope it is everyone. I know this is generally described as a graveyard shift, but hopefully people have had a lovely lunch and found their way back to their interfaces and their screens to follow me on this age diversity journey that we've been on as an organisation. It's good to see Patrick, as always. Yes, we've crossed panel paths many times over the recent times, along with Chris Brooks, who chaired the morning session. And Chris made a comment about the I guess a relatively small world about the age agenda and who's in it and who's looking to change it. Well, we need to change that. We need to engage and bring in organisations, individuals, governments here in the UK, but internationally as well. I know that's been a question this morning about the international scope and opportunity. Hopefully through my presentation, you'll see some of the work that we're doing, but also how each organisation that you're part of can benefit from that and have a part to play in mitigating, removing barriers to the age diversity challenge. So I am now going to hopefully share my Okay, so is this first slide visible to everyone?
Yes, yeah, we can see that. Thanks.
Good, and it shows the title and the brief given by Dods, and I firstly just start by saying thank you again to Dods for raising age diversity as an opportunity, but also recognising the challenges that we face in addressing this protected characteristic. Because it needs more airplay, it needs more organisations and people involved, as I mentioned earlier. It always makes me wonder, throughout my career, I've had 4 careers to date. I think, well, I'm in my 4th career. Started off in the banking environment in the City of London, but working internationally across the main financial centres in North America, in Asia, and the UK. From there, I went and worked with the head of policy at the Chamber of Commerce, so good outlook on so many different types of business, of size, of industry sector, and the challenges and opportunities that they faced. From there, I went to work for an international research organisation around transport and infrastructure, and took my international knowledge there to share design and influence of programs, research programs for vulnerable groups. And vulnerable groups in that environment tend to be the very young and the older generation. So that naturally flowed into the organisation that I founded 7 years ago now, which was to look at why age diversity in the workplace was such an issue in terms of organisations seeking to have the right skills and talent in their organisations, but also people that have been lost to the workplace. Did they have a mechanism, a way back into the workplace? And Brian touched on this earlier about some of the work that the International Longevity Centre did a few years ago now, where they recognised, I think they described it as the missing million, in terms of a number of people that over 50 who would like to work, but they weren't finding the right opportunities back into employment. And I think there were some numbers around that figure, that around that 1 million figure, that if those people were back into work, the benefit to UK GDP would be in excess of £80 billion. Now, I take those sort of numbers with a little pinch of salt because having come from a research background, sorry, Patrick, I know we can massage numbers sometimes as we want to present them. But suffice to say, if we had a wider opportunity for organisations to benefit from that workforce, the benefit to the economy would be huge. And also the age agenda has been heightened more so in recent times, being included as one of the 4 grand challenges in the UK industrial strategy that is being rolled out in local industrial strategies. You know, that's alongside the likes of AI, mobility and data. So, you know, really recognised by UK government as a key factor of how we're working and how we can utilise values and benefits from the age sector. And we spend quite a bit of time more recently working with regional authorities on developing their local industrial strategies and build up their implementation plans together that sit alongside skills and employment strategies as well, quite often. So it's good that we're having the opportunity to get the age agenda you know, in at the coalface of strategy design, particularly in the public sector, but how that transcends into economic development within the private sector. And we've seen that with our own organisation, and you'll see the Champion Age Diversity mark in the bottom right-hand corner of my slides. And this is an accreditation, for want of a better term, where we invite organisations to champion age diversity, and in order to showcase this badge and this message, we ask those organisations to commit to certain behaviours and cultural best practice within their organisations. That means that they are very considerate of age diversity. And our mark has been used, I know Maria referred to disability confident earlier, and our champion mark has been used alongside that in government regional development programmes around the UK. So it's really fantastic, again, to see standards being raised for organisations to meet these criteria that not only allow them to showcase themselves as considerate for diversity, but it really has a ripple effect to the supply chain and businesses that are looking to participate in that economic development. But that then stretches into local communities, whether that's in terms of recruitment, whether it's in terms of social connection and whole mobility angle of that, and ultimately in terms of where employment happens in those areas where we're reaching out to, let's say, harder to reach people who are looking for that help back into employment. You really begin to impact the whole well-being challenge and question as well. Our peers and I say this because I'm happy to say it, because I've got to know chief execs of both of these organisations, Stonewall for LGBT and Business Disability Forum. I mention these 2 organisations, A, because they've been around a long time and people generally know who they are, and we're relatively new, let's say about 7 years old now, but having collaborated and worked with those organisations, it's clear that we see similar challenges, similar opportunities, which each of the D&I agenda areas that we are considering and looking at. So that's a little sort of bit of an introduction of who we are, who I am, and the sort of thing we do. So I've got a few slides. I won't spend too much time on some of them. We've already heard about the people that we're talking about. Again, I think a couple of earlier panelists have referred to the generation groups. In the Age Diversity Forum, when we work with our employer engagement partners, it's very much about all generations. Although it is fair to say when age diversity is brought up as a topic, people generally go straight to the older worker, the older workforce group. I think that's because that's where probably most issues and bias and discrimination occurs, but that's not to say that it doesn't happen in other areas. But as an organisation, we're looking to, as I mentioned, to mitigate, remove barriers. The 3 R's that I mentioned earlier as well. We very much align with fuller working lives, thoughts about recruitment, retention and retraining. Key aspects to how an organisation manages its workforce and develops opportunities for its workforce. So absolutely, align with that. And part of our toolkit as well. There's been various toolkits shown today. We've got one as well. So perhaps we should probably collaborate on toolkits and come up with the perfect one. So in terms of these groups, and I know they can be called slightly, they can be referred to slightly differently, and maybe the year periods are slightly changed, but as with most diversity agenda, this should be irrelevant, right? We should be talking about equal opportunities for everyone, whatever your age. But unfortunately, we do have to categorise. We have to. It seems strange in a diversity world. We like to put people in boxes where we're trying to remove those barriers and those boundaries. But I think this is something else that was mentioned earlier. Benefit of talking last is that you've heard some great stuff from other panelists, and you can refer to that and and learn from those things as well. But the DWP job centre environment, where we are a employability provision supply across all the offices around the UK. They count older workers between the ages of 50 to 64, and using ONS data, and in a way that is out of date. And we're actually talking to ONS at the moment about how to refresh and reevaluate such data and metric to give a more meaningful, maybe, and maybe a clearer picture. Because again, I think we've heard a couple of times during the day about that, that default retirement age being lapsed now, so that doesn't exist. People can work, beyond 60, 65, and the extension of the pension period means we have to work long before the state pension. Some people have to work longer for various reasons. Again, we heard this earlier about whether that's for commercial, for financial reasons, or they may just want to be part of that social fabric, again, that we heard about earlier, and they want to give back, they want to contribute to society and to the workplace. So lots of reasons why people are working longer, but and why maybe some of these, we need to move past some of these envelopes of generations, but part of the way we work and the way certainly central government operate, it does bring us back to certain challenges and questions within such groups. Stereotyping, again, we've heard this term used today, and it really, I think it applies to all protected characteristics, some shape or form, but I think in particular to age. And again, something that was talked about earlier, and I did a workshop earlier, a couple of months ago, through the Institute of Coding. I sit in the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Board for the Institute of Coding, which is a national programme all about developing digital skills for the jobs of the future, but recognising what the educational challenges are, but what industry needs as well. And when we use language in various ways, we almost immediately create some sort of ism around the environment we're talking about. And I was going to pick up on what something Chris said earlier, actually, as well. I mean, you talk about the clock ticking down for people. That's, again, we need to be very wary of how we speak and what sort of how that presents itself to certain listeners, but other comments that we sort of we make off the cuff, you know, oh, it must be my age, you know, because of a certain situation. And we've referenced to the midlife MOT today as well, about a couple of people maybe not quite accepting the that term that's being used for some pilots and for some industry programs that are using such a program to help facilitate supporting individuals on their career journey. So whilst the program itself is a good thing, maybe we need to come up with some different terms for the environment they're working in. And just to be honest, just the term older worker I find quite interesting, and maybe we could find something different. Banji mentioned, she talked about her silver lining earlier. I thought that was quite a different one I hadn't heard before, but I thought that was quite good, because silver lining tends to talk about you know, a benefit, an advantage, something that, an advantage that comes with something else. So so maybe in terms of stereotyping, the way we talk, the language that we use, we heard it referred to a big part of the where bias exists in organisations is in the recruitment process, and technology is used quite a lot now particularly by larger agencies that use various algorithms and artificial intelligence to identify relevant and appropriate people for certain roles. I think that's dangerous in a way. Yes, it helps manage volume, but then we have to think about, well, who is actually designing that code? Who's designing that algorithm? And is it reflective of the diversity market that we're looking to be part of? And in the recruitment side of things, a lot of the traditional recruitment channels overlook good people that may be really good and relevant for the role. And algorithms maybe sometimes don't take into account transferable skills. And I heard that, I think I mentioned from Katie earlier as well, about, you know, people transferring from sector to sector, particularly with what Katie was describing within teaching, using one's experience and know-how and in a different environment. Let's be open to that, but let's not just encourage the individual to present themselves as with a broader scope, but we have to also engage the employer that they're as open-minded and considerate for that same opportunity to bring someone in with a broader experience and value and technical competence, maybe, that doesn't quite tick that desired box. I think the public sector's got a lot of work to do in that. They, you know, there's a lot of tick boxing going on for public sector recruitment, but I know, you know, they want to address those aspects and be as you know, open to as much widening participation as possible. But with stereotypes also come, you know, myths, perceptions of protected characteristics. Again, this, you know, age is not overlooked here. You know, and again, a couple of these we've heard today about, you know, older workers can't learn new things. You know, just absolutely ridiculous. Older workers and technology don't mix. I'd like to think everyone has some sort of technology interest and involvement nowadays. I think both Apple and Samsung are like 40 years plus in existence. You know, so if you think of an organisation that's 40 years in existence, that, you know, that brings in a lot of people into that, of all age groups, into the awareness. We've worked with a large international tech firm where they're really worried about losing some legacy type technology skills and knowledge and experience, because they want to use that to develop and design new product. and because that previous technology actually can form new solutions and solve problems for how new technology is delivered and how new products are delivered. So redeploying and transitioning, which I'll probably come on to a bit later as well, are key aspects of moving away from stereotyping people and groups, so organisations can tap into the best. When we talk about the recruitment side, organisations want the best people for the role. We just want to make sure that they have access to the widest scope of individual with the widest scope and potential of skills that can help that organisation develop and move forward. And just a couple more myths, older workers take younger people's jobs and older workers cost more. I think these are both reflected on in different ways earlier. Just basically not true. So be really careful about the way we use language, the way in all aspects, whether it's in areas like the 3 R's of recruitment, retraining and retention, or whether it's messaging and dissemination of values. Let's make sure that we're considering that. I know there's some technology that helps in our diversity. One I learned yesterday is Textio, that I think is something that's used quite a lot in terms of job content design, that really helps analyse what we present as a job description and ensures that we're not using words and terminology that cuts people away from the opportunity to apply. I think I heard somewhere that it was actually at the workshop I mentioned earlier, that if the word analyst is used in a tech job description, something like 90% of applicants will be male. I don't know exactly how or why that is the case, but it's just a reflection of how language and the way we present something can remove people from an opportunity. I'm talking around these slides rather than go through the points, but hopefully I've covered most of these points on here. That whole thing about age and the vocabulary, if you like, really responds to some of the attitudes about age that are formed early in life, in terms of how maybe there's some systemic stuff going on, or some of the terminology, like I mentioned, like the clock ticking down and it must be my age. These are references that refer to some waning individual or competence. So let's move on. Changing behaviours is something that will help challenge and resolve a lot of these issues. It's described as cultural change as well, and I'm sure I'll talk about that here and beyond as well. But these are things we can do in the workplace that has an impact on removing barriers and mitigating bias, unconscious or otherwise. And again, unconscious bias was mentioned earlier. I think most bias is particularly conscious, to be honest, and if we really thought about it. So if we have a good practice and a culture of equal opportunities for all, and everyone's aware of that, and the messaging and dissemination of those opportunities is known by all, then I think we can quite quickly have a positive impact on behaviours. Leadership, of course, is important, and I think that was again mentioned earlier. So apologies if I'm sort of restating things, but sometimes to restate is good, and to re-emphasise. But just yesterday, I was on a diversity discussion in the private sector with a private sector organisation, where the chief exec was talking about how important it was for him to be, showcasing diversity as a key ingredient and value to the organisation. But as we went through the day, we had employees of that organisation saying, "Oh, can we know a bit more about this, please? And where do we find out about these diverse values, and how can we take part?" So, as well as having the leadership, which is great, and it absolutely requires that, we've got to ensure that the messaging and the dissemination of that value and that vision and that opportunity is made well and is visible and accessible for everyone. And I'll talk a little bit more about that a bit later as well. Just picking up some of these points, the power of diversity and driving growth. It's not just the right thing to do. It's a business imperative, and we've heard the business case mentioned before today. I think now, without exception, with every organisation that we talk to, and certainly in the early discussions, we get the question back, what's in it for us? So the good news is that business case does exist, and there's been reference to that by other speakers today, and I will comment on that as well. Throughout this presentation, but just as and I've got a couple of infographics later to share. But we have a Champion Age Diversity Day, which is in June, and in June we had a panel of some global D&I leaders, and one in particular, Shaheen Akram from ING, talked about the competitive edge of focus to diversity. And there's been a question about international scope and influence. They have a common outlook across all their 40 locations, I think it is, about ensuring that there's a common consideration for all the protected characteristics to ensure no one is left behind, but also the challenges of age, the age challenge is felt and in different ways, but in so many same ways across the globe. Patrick talked about, I think, Japan, North America, and Australia earlier. Can certainly echo that. Japan, I've worked quite a lot in Japan, and they've definitely got that deep family culture of looking after elders, and that now goes into the workplace. And our own champion program, the Champion Age Diversity program, we have organisations from all over the world come and say, we need to showcase our consideration for this, because more and more organisations are seeing the opportunities of using diversity for improvement in business performance, and particularly in this COVID environment when organisations are looking at this whole economic transition period to utilise diversity as a key part of that strategy is certainly something coming through alongside the feeling of organisations that are going to succeed and benefit from the transition is organisations with purpose and organisations who have good reputation. And that supports the whole consideration for D&I generally. And as age transcends all those other protected characteristics, and we talk about intersectionality a bit later as well, age is a great focus point for organisations to really capitalise, to use a business management term, on the opportunities as we all transition through this economic environment. Okay, I'm going to shift on from this one because some of these things we'll pick up on. But if anyone has any questions about specific points that they can see on the slides, please do mention them in the chat or whatever. I'm sure we can pick them up a bit later. So value in age and workplace, way to describe this, but this, I just copy and pasted the brief from Dods on the title of this section of value in assets and recognising the benefits of age diversity at work. And first of all, there's a couple of the bullet points I'd like to amend a little bit. Where the first one is ensuring aging colleagues feel valued. I would rather say ensure colleagues of all age feel valued. So that's just a slightly different spin on, if you like, of recognising that multi-generational groups can have such a positive impact to the working environment and the output of a business environment as well. And again, we'll touch on various things as we go through the this presentation. But yeah, let's try and really bring in all age groups there, because I know, again, I think this was mentioned earlier as well, in this COVID situation, and this happens in various crises. It was particularly felt back in 2008 with the financial crisis. Various protected characteristic groups will feel that they've been most adversely affected. And I won't say there's a bit of a bun fight going on at the moment, but we're more affected than you are, whether it's disability or whether it's age or whatever. At some level, there is that adverse effect. But I think at the moment there's enough organisations and there's enough discussion going on about, I say, the values of diversity right now at crisis points, how valuable it can be. So let's really amplify these messages, and this is why it's really great to have these opportunities to amplify and showcase the values of age in the workplace, capitalising on that intergenerational sharing. So I was actually going to come back. But one of the changes, the value and assets bit, says recognising the benefits of age diversity. Recognising that there are benefits of age diversity. Let's be really clear that there are benefits. So engage, get involved. Let's find out what those benefits are. Are we capitalising on those? Are we addressing those? Are we being inclusive of those in our own organisations? What can I do to make a difference there? What can I do to showcase others? A lot of the work that we've done with the Institute of Coding, I'm sure you've heard this term before, and I think I heard it briefly mentioned earlier, I can't remember who said it, but when we talk about opportunities and for everyone, does that look like me? So when we're talking about roles and opportunities, if it doesn't look like me, if it doesn't look like the audience that you're looking to engage, then they're never going to come forward. You're never going to attract the skills, experience and best individuals for certain situations. So let's absolutely, amplify that message and say that there are benefits of age diversity in the workplace. You talked there again about creating a community culture, counter bias, counter stereotyping. Already touched on it earlier about the type of stereotyping that exists and the way we use language, for example, the way we bust myths about certain aspects of the way we operate. Let's change that behaviour. Let's implement a better practice. Part of what we do within the forum is absolutely disseminate that, share contributions from organisations about what they do and what organisations do well. Let's bring that into the forum and let others adopt it. That's the only way change is going to happen. That's the only way we're going to have a positive impact. But other sort of ways, and again, some of these have been talked about earlier. Reward and recognition has been talked about. Yes, of course, we want fair reward and recognition for all. The gender pay gap was a huge step forward. And I know the whole racial pay gap is being talked about right now as well. Let's really, buckle down on that and make sure that we can just remove that from the equation. We need to get beyond that. Information sharing, I touched on that earlier, how we disseminate, how we get those messages out. Maybe different generations will look to different ways of accessing information, whether that's electronically, whether it's through subscriptions, whether it's through town hall meetings, whether it's through workshops, whatever it is. Be aware and open to what not only just works for your organisation, but what is in demand from those individuals, and help people, not only contribute to that so they can see that they're adding value, but how they access that information as well. Empowerment, we heard about earlier as well, such a strong term, but something that if we can, we're inclusive of everyone having a part to play in whatever form, whether it's part of the decision-making process or raising ideas or integration of suggestions, building strategy, developing plans, all of those components add up to a feeling of I'm valued in this organisation. I've got a role to play at whatever career level, whatever. And I know Banji talked about, the various, levels in the NHS. Everyone has a role to play there. Well-being, I've already talked about, that ripple effect of being employed, and with well-being leads to generally improved health. So you get lower rates of absence, stress, more motivation. Economic factors begin to be more positive when your employees are, feeling better about themselves. Instill a bit of pride in the organisation. That comes. A lot of these things are combined with that empowerment, well-being, having a role to play, the whole job satisfaction. What I didn't have on my list that we can add to that is the whole flexible working thing that we heard so greatly about earlier. Flexible working is so important, and I agree with what the guys are saying. It's important for everyone. It used to be flexible working. Older people need to be working flexibly. Well, no, everyone, whether you're someone with a young family wants that work-life balance. It was touched on as well, and I do agree. I think there's something that I can't remember who said it was, flexible working is also about shift patterns. Having worked internationally, it's about global patterns of work. It's a global village, as they say. It's a global marketplace. We have to operate maybe at different time scales in different time zones. So we need to be flexible in that approach. And I think during this whole COVID thing, organisations have seen how flexible working works for them. Not just, as the guys were saying, someone going forward, I want some flexible working. The businesses should absolutely be being proactive. So let's flip that question about how businesses benefit from offering flexible working and showcasing that flexible opportunities that all of their workforce can take a benefit from. Bit more about the values of an age-diverse workforce. Again, some of these I've already touched on about, and some of these are sort of pretty self-explanatory, hopefully. Broadening that perspective, widening participation, bringing together that know-how and knowledge. A lot of what we hear from our organisation work with, and I've heard this picked up on a number of panels and all sessions recently, is about softer attributes. So going beyond the technical competence of a role, really looking at how one's broader knowledge and ideas can be utilised really positively in the workplace. That comes back to what I was talking about earlier about widening that scope of viewing a person for an opportunity to be successful in a particular role. Drives innovation, bringing all that, packaging all that together. Innovation in terms of product design I talked about earlier, a reflecting market I talked about earlier, builds that healthy talent pool and pipeline, because you're going to get people remaining loyal to the company more. You're going to have that succession planning. It's going to be easier to manage and develop. You're going to mitigate, if not eliminate, skills gaps. And that's a real big cross-industry problem right now. Talk about best practice, mentoring and coaching. I think reverse mentoring was mentioned earlier. Absolutely, I believe in that. Economic diversity of talent, the social value responsibility. This all builds on that corporate and social awareness that organisations have had for quite a long time. They want to position themselves as a responsible organisation. The whole social value thing. A lot of this is part of the Social Value Act, and I will be the first one to mention Brexit, that B word. But Social Value Act also brings into play supply chains and being looking more regionally about supply chains. So the impact that diversity can have in raising standards across supply chains and more local supply chains, again, can have such a positive impact to business. So do get involved. Intersectionality, the great thing about age is that it transcends all the other protected characteristics. So, you know, there's older women, there's older black people, there's older gay people, there's older, at whatever stage of your career, you're of an age. So let's have a focus towards age to help consolidate other areas. I realise that I'm gabbling on, so I'm going to rush through these last bits, but I'm happy to share some of this stuff. Just some of the, I don't know if this is going to show.
Thanks for this, Stephen. Just to prompt people if they've got questions, we could we've got another couple of minutes. So, Steve, if you want to finish up, but in the meantime, if people would like to ask any questions in the box as well.
Yeah. Can you see this infographic I've just shown, or do I have to sort of reshare that? Oh, I have to reshare that.
I think if you come out of full screen mode on your presentation, then that should help. And that it's a little bit different from Teams.
Yeah, hold on a second. What I'm going to do is now I think I've let me start sharing again, and what I will do is so I've completely I'm going to move on. What I would say is, and I'm just going to reflect, happy health of the workforce. I've sort of covered this sort of stuff in what I've been talking about in terms of what these actions achieve. But I do want to invite people to contact me. I've had a couple of infographics I was going to share as well, which really gives a bit more data and feedback about the benefits and values of engaging in age diversity in the workplace and what you can get back from that. We've got our own brochure here that I'd be happy to send to people if they just want to email me at that, that email address that's on screen. Hopefully you can see that. And we'd invite people to, you know, join us in the programme to champion age diversity. And I will stop.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Steve, for that. Really informative and insightful. We've probably just got a minute now. If anyone did have any questions or further thoughts for Steve, or his details are there if anyone would like to follow up. But so we do have one through from Lucy, and she asks, are there any specific approaches line managers could take when managing poor performance in more experienced members of teams? Or is it simply being fair and treating people the same? It's an interesting question there.
In that regard, absolutely, people got to be treated the same. You know, poor performance can happen to anyone. You know, you don't have to be old to have poor performance. I find that a strange question, actually. So if I heard that correctly, but I don't think you need to be more sympathetic, empathetic, whatever that word is, towards a particular person if their performance is waning somewhat. I think if you, as an organisation, have those behaviours and practice and culture of equal opportunities for everyone, and whatever the age group, they have that opportunity to continue to develop their skills and their personal development opportunities to be the best that they can be for that organisation, and that's part of that appraisal process and training plan, then I think you can, as long as you have those things in place, then you can address poor performance in equal measure.
It's really good answer, and actually an interesting question. I worked on this in government maybe a decade or so ago, and the thing that came up a lot there was people raising as an issue sometimes the difficulty of a younger line manager managing someone older. So I don't know if it's that kind of thing that is
that's a different thing, Patrick. Yeah, and quite often one of the a lot of what we've done with organisations is to address that exact situation. So working with management groups within organisations to ensure, you know, don't be concerned or almost fear having someone who may be potentially more experienced or who has been has a bit more work background than they have, utilize that for the value of what you're trying to achieve. And I think that comes up as well when in the question of, older people being more expensive, because sometimes people do have, are coming from, let's say, successful in however you want to measure that careers, and looking to utilize and showcase and contribute that knowledge and experience into a different sector, into a different situation, so that that individual's not looking, to usurp that manager or whatever. They just want to add value to the organization and feel that they're getting the opportunity to add that value to the organization. So absolutely, for younger managers to embrace that opportunity and that level of experience that can bring to their team.
Thank you. Excellent. Really, really appreciate it, Steve. Thank you very much for that.